Well, good day to everyone joining us and welcome to today's X-Talks webinar. Today's talk is entitled Unleashing the Power of Play in a Child-Centered Approach to Enhance Patient Experience. My name is Ryan Muse and I'll be your X-Talks host for today. Today's webinar will run for approximately 60 minutes, and this presentation includes a Q&A session with our speakers. Now, the webinar is designed to be interactive, and webinars work best when you're involved. So please feel free to submit your questions and comments for our speakers throughout the presentation using the questions chat box, and we'll try to attend to your questions throughout and a dedicated Q&A session at the end. Now, this chat box is located in the control panel, which is on the right-hand side of your screen. And if you require any assistance along the way, you can also contact me at any time by sending a message using the same chat panel. At this time, know that all participants are in listen-only mode, and please note that the event will be recorded and made available for streaming on xtalks.com. At this point, I'd like to thank Little Journey for bringing everyone together here today. Little Journey is a digital e-support platform that psychologically prepares, informs, and supports children and families before, during, and after healthcare procedures, all from the comfort and safety of their own home. Designed to reduce healthcare-induced anxiety, the Little Journey platform has been co-created with children, families, and healthcare staff to provide end-to-end support throughout each hospital journey. The Little Journey smartphone app delivers interactive and engaging content tailored to a child's age, procedure type, also, and hospital. So, accompanying Little Journey's web portal, accessed by healthcare staff, enables organizations to configure the app content, building virtual patient pathways, and editing key information in near real time. Now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today's event. Dr. Chris Evans is founder and CEO at Little Journey Limited, NHS England Clinical Entrepreneur Fellow, and NHS Innovation Accelerator Fellow. His company's aim is to deliver the personalized end-to-end psychological preparation and support to families visiting hospitals for a procedure from the comfort and safety of their home. And Little Journey is currently working with the LEGO Foundation to create a playful, co-designed solution that will enable healthcare organizations to learn about the needs, preferences, and health behaviors of children before they come to the hospital. So now, without further ado, though, I'd like to hand the mic over to our moderator for today's discussion, Dr. Chris Evans. You may begin when you're ready.
Thank you, Ryan. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. We have people from all over the world here today joining the call, both on the panelists and as part of the audience, so welcome. As Ryan mentioned, my name is Chris Evans. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Little Journey. And we've been lucky enough to be working with the LEGO Foundation over the past year through their Play for All accelerator. And the project that we were doing was looking at how we can advance and better support children with neurodiverse needs using learning through play and design for all principles. And as we come to the end of the project, we wanted to highlight some of the amazing work that we've seen over the past year in this space and show some of the process and progress that we've taken and made at Little Journey to deliver something that's valuable to families. We have some incredible speakers here today who will each tell you a bit about their own work, and then at the end we'll be having this panel discussion. So to get us going, I'm going to hand around to the panel now to introduce themselves. And starting running down the list with Maureen, if you're able to introduce yourself, please.
Sure. Hi, I'm Maureen Dunn. I've been involved in neurodiversity work for over 2 decades, have a lot of experience both as an expert in research and program development and also entrepreneurship, but also involved, with lived experience with family members. So I've been working in this field for, really have experience in a lot of different perspectives. And also I'm a co-founder of the Autism Angels group, and I'm the author of a book that's being released by Wiley in March called The Neurodiversity Edge. It's really more for organizations how to embrace and include different types of neurodiversity. And I'm a former foster parent as well of a nonverbal autistic child.
Thanks, Maureen. I'll hand to Jorge.
Hello, my name is Dorte Kjærgaard, and I'm a research specialist at the Leo Foundation, and also been working for the last 20 years creating solutions for children and their learning experiences. And lately, the last 10 years, I've been developing also specialized experience for children at hospitals by using a child-centered approach to their experience at hospitals.
Thank you. And Rachel?
Hi, I'm Rachel Callender. I'm joining you from Australia. I am coming to you from a few perspectives. One as a mother of a daughter with a very rare condition, so lived experience in the neurodiverse space, but also as a healthcare communication consultant and an author and a trainer.
Thank you. And Jamie?
Hi there, my name is Jamie. I'm a developmental psychologist, and my work focuses on transdiagnostic approaches to understanding needs and designing support. And I spent the last 20 years working in the fields of inclusion psychology and learning, with a focus on empowering children and young people, working at the sort of intersection of psychology, design, and social justice.
And before I introduce our first speaker for today, as a quick introduction to myself, by background, I'm an anaesthetic doctor or anesthesiologist, depending on where you are in the world. And I co-founded Little Journey based on my experiences as a clinician, my research at UCL, and also as a parent of a child with profound hearing loss and the experiences of having to take him to hospital on a regular basis. So first up is Dr. Thomas Fransden, and I'm very excited to hear his presentation. I'll get him to introduce himself first and then speak for 5 minutes before we'll ask him a question or two. Thank you.
Thank you, Little Journey. Thank you, Chris, for having me. I'm the Chief Medical Project Officer of a new children's hospital being built in Copenhagen, with a focus of integrating play in all aspects of the hospital. Besides being this Chief Medical Project Officer, I'm also a pediatric hematologist, oncologist, and active researcher in leukemia, but also researcher in play in hospitals. So just to show you a brief picture of our new hospital being built, picture from yesterday. So we're not there yet, but we do have the children in other parts of the hospital, but not this building. This is where it's going to happen. So when you want to integrate play in all aspects of a children's hospital, you have to work with the building, you have to work with the staff, and you have to work with designs. So I'll just go briefly through building and design and focus on how we get staff ready to actually integrate play in their daily work with children and young people. For the building, you see here 5 different design principles, and topping them all off is integrated play all over this hospital. So this is a clear message from the administration and directors that this is the purpose of the hospital, besides the core issue of treating sick children. And this is the playful building that we are having, 2 hands reaching out towards the city and towards nature. And that's all I'm going to say about the building today. There are tons to talk about with the building, but we won't go there today. And the same basically goes for designing. I just want to say that we have a lot of focus on the user experience. Obviously, when they come to a hospital, they're here to be treated for disease. So treating everything related to health and treatment is at the core of the project, but we are extending this, the issues and the focus also to the quality of life of the patients and also to the coherence of the family. That's what you see in these circles. And you see a good user experience with a happy child, even after a painful procedure, but everyone's happy and the family are involved. And we have a team working with the design, our own in-house design team consisting of 10 to 15 people, depending on what phase we're working in. It's different competencies such as architects, service designers, play designers, anthropologists, and test facilitators. And we test basically everything we try to do, not only the science, but also when we want to introduce new ways of working with play in treatment or rehabilitation. And I just usually show this to the clinicians. Why do we test all the time? Because we have this very creative in-house design team, and sometimes they come up with great ideas like this cup. And when you test it, sometimes you find out it's not that great of an idea. So that's why we do testing all the time. So working with staff is the main focus, and that's what I'm going to talk about now. In order to address the ambitions that we have for the hospital, we have 5 different focus areas. And when you look at this figure on the left, you can see that research and professionalism are focus areas, coherence in treatment and coherence with the home situation is also a focus area, but partnering with the child and a playful culture are 2 other issues and 2 main focuses of the hospital. So this is decided, this is through a long process with the staff, so they have been part of choosing these focus areas, which is important when you want to change the culture. And then we are trying to gain legitimacy by doing research in how do we use play, because play is used in children's hospitals all over the world. It's just not systematic. And this means that you have these fantastic staff in different areas. They do fantastic things, but it's not a system for the hospital. And whenever someone leaves an area, sometimes the play incentives, they die out in that area. So it's just not systematic, and people are not sure how they approach it. So we looked at interventions using play in 300 different publications around the world. And what we see, I just want to mention this one also, is just came out a few weeks ago from the eye support group, looking at restraining children when you do painful procedures. It's a great paper working with standards for how can you get away from restraining children. It should be a focus of all children's hospitals. So what we found is that the play is used in procedures and diagnostics, treatment recovery, patient education, and adaptation. And we try to train our front runners, as we call them, all types of staff, doctors, nurses, cooks, anyone working in a hospital. They are here for a front runners team for half a year. We have had 5 teams now, and it's a great success. There's a waiting list to get into this. We can talk about facilitators for play in hospitals. We can talk about barriers for play in hospitals. We can get back to that in a few minutes when we do the discussion at the end. But just ending with this, living every day also when we're sick as another focus. Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. That's an amazing project, and I'm so excited to be able to visit it in a few weeks. From one of the recent discussions that we've had, I learned that actually in Denmark you don't have health play specialist or child life specialists in your hospitals, and you mentioned briefly there about how you're trying to make sure that the team have the wider skill set to support play in the hospital. Really, I'd just like to see how you're doing it and how you're actually bringing it about on a wider level within the organization.
That's a good question. And just want to say for one thing that we are envious of countries having child life specialists and play health specialists. We don't have it. I don't think any of the Scandinavian countries have it. One aspect of this is that we think that the clinical staff needs to have this competency as well. You cannot outsource, because it's not only play, it's also the relation with the child. And the child life specialist or whoever is helping you with this will not always be there at 3 o'clock in the morning or at 11 at night. And you have to do painful procedures or do procedures of any type. You need to have that competency in your staff. So we're running an educational program to train anyone working in children's hospital to be able to gain these competencies. You can learn some tricks and some insights, so you are able to make good situations even if you have to do something painful.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for your time. I'd like to now welcome our next speaker to this virtual stage. So it's Maureen Dunn. I'll hand over now.
Thank you, Chris. So Maureen Dunn, first I want to just comment that I think the products that Little Journey's developing, as a parent and having experience in a lot of different perspectives of neurodiversity, I think it's so important. And going back to my, especially, I mean, I've got some stories that we don't have time to go into for my own kids, but when I was a foster parent, especially of a nonverbal child with autism, I remember just how difficult and challenging it was for just any medical procedure and the level of anxiety involved, preparing him for that process. And so I think just in general, this work is really important. But what I want to focus briefly on, I know I don't have a lot of time, is the research I've been doing has been more linked to the importance of co-creation and involving people with lived experience, whether it's in product development, in hiring, and in just organizations and companies more generally. But the research I've been working on really foundationally gets into the importance of psychological safety and trust. And like Jamie and others here, other presenters that do some amazing work, I think a lot of us really support universal design principles, meaning that we're going to create organizations and processes where we're designing to be optimal for as many people as possible, to be accessible to as many people as possible in terms of information processing styles. But I want to talk a little bit about the psychological safety and trust issues, because in my research and experience, and my book focuses a bit on this as well, is that even with all the amazing things that you could be doing on a product side or organizational side and universal design side, if you don't have psychological safety or trust, you won't have a healthy organizational trust culture. It'll break down. And there's so many examples of neurodivergent people that I've worked with. It's a very common story where people are included sort of superficially, and there's a lot of great things happening, in terms of even universal design. Maybe there's some sensitivities around sensory overload. There's protocols in place to consider different types of ways of communication, but then in the background there might be bullying going on, or there's just hostility, or there's a purposeful making communication not very transparent, someone feels left out. And then it's like, to me, that is the foundation of so much of, I think, what we're all trying to achieve and accomplish with actual, like, what I would call authentic neuro-inclusion. And and I think then thinking about like the healthcare, I've served on several boards in healthcare and on hospitals, and worked with a lot of startups and entrepreneurs, and I think it's really, some of the work Little Journey and others are doing, just also, I think that what I'm talking about here with psychological safety and trust also applies, because there's there's work, and I've seen it myself, I witnessed it, where there's neurodivergent children where there is a real issue, in anxiety before a procedure, or they're in the hospital, but they don't feel comfortable telling the nurse or the doctor, or but then everyone leaves the room and they're talking to their stuffed animals, right? And so whatever you can do to reduce that anxiety, to build that trust, to build that atmosphere of psychological safety, in addition to all the other things that can be done to make it an accessible product or culture or environment, I think is absolutely essential, in my opinion. And so that's kind of the thing I wanted to really focus on, but I also just wanted to be available for whatever questions anyone has.
Thanks, Maureen. That's great. From the discussions again that we've had previously, I think it's evident there's introducing and implementing new changes and ways of working within big systems can be really challenging, and it is often a very slow process.
Right.
Can you give any examples of where you found sort of quick wins for embracing neurodiversity in healthcare?
Yes, I'm working with a couple insurance companies actually now. What's interesting is one of them anyway started out where they were trying to, this is sort of different than product development, but looking to make sure that they are an inclusive culture. But then they realized that, they had actually a pretty significant population of neurodivergent workers already working for them. And then just figuring out, well, how to involve them in the conversations that are being had, right, with how do we become more inclusive. And there's other hospitals, like I said, I've been on several boards. One of the boards I've been on, and this applies for a lot of organizations I've worked with, where, I don't think it is a quick process. I think to really get there, you have to commit to the deep work. But as a starting point, something I've done, and there's been recent legislation I helped pass in Illinois in May as well, but starting out with just a simple value statement and getting the buy-in from the highest levels of the organization, naming at the board of directors, the board of trustees, the CEO, the C-suite, because that is huge in itself, because you start with a value statement, hey, we commit as an organization to valuing neurodivergent people. And then, that kind of starts to trickle down the whole, everyone in the organization starts to take notice and say, and it's something really simple. It's just a value statement, but I've seen how that becomes a starting point where, even hospitals and other healthcare types of institutions or projects where just even the products then they're working on, there is more genuine buy-in of hey, yeah, we want to include these different perspectives, we value this. And so that's something that's it's not expensive, doesn't cost much to do, but it's been interesting and surprising to me how effective that's been at a starting point. But I think to really make significant change, that's got to only be the starting point, right, where then there's the deeper work that's being done of making sure, right, that everybody has training, right, throughout an organization. Everybody is knowledgeable about what neurodiversity is, how rich and diverse it is too. If you've met one autistic person or one person ADHD, you can't assume that you understand everything about what that looks like, right? And I think especially with children, if you're working with children who maybe can sense a lot and feel a lot, but maybe don't have the same verbal, they're not going to be able to articulate their emotions quite as well. I think having that knowledge, the trainings are important, but I think also just a simple value statement, in my experience, has made a big difference.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Maureen. No, I'm really, really excited to introduce our next speaker. We first heard her incredible story a few months ago and were just blown away, and we just couldn't not put her on the list of speakers today. So I'd like to hand over to Rachel to tell us a bit about her story.
Thank you so much, Chris. I am delighted to be here and with such esteemed company to share this work that I'm so passionate about. But first, I need to introduce you to this little human. This is Evie Callender. This is my little daughter. She was born with a very rare chromosome condition, and the doctors didn't really know what we could expect with her life. But what she proved was that she was completely awesome, and I loved being her mum. And she had so many abilities. When most people used to ask me, what's wrong with your child? And I had to kind of start every conversation from that deficit subtractive space. And by the age of 2 years old, which is these photos here, I then had to start filling out needs assessment forms, checkbox forms and documents, and also the medicalized model of healthcare also has such deficit subtractive language. And I just remember trying to answer this 2-page document one day, and I couldn't tick a single question that those questions were asking me, can your child do blah, X, Y, Z? And I couldn't tick a single thing, and this just broke me. I was exhausted and overwhelmed and just so sad and just crushed, and I felt so powerless and hopeless, because to me, that wasn't the full story, and I hated the thought that the person at the other end was going to think that he was a child that could do nothing, that had no value, and was costing the system a lot of money. And so I said to the healthcare professionals, you know, this form just sucks. I hate it. I don't want to hand it in. And the only way I'll hand it in is if I can make up my own form to go alongside it. And they looked at me strangely, and I said, look, let me just make up my own form. And so I did. I basically came up with a few questions that I could already answer yes to about Evie. And I called it the Evie's awesomeness form. And this has had a few different iterations over its lifetime. It started out as a very plain Word document, but now it's been zhuzhed up a little bit and I've given it some color. But basically, in answering these questions of all of the things that my child could do that were never ever going to be asked on an official government document, gave me such a sense of hope and pride and a knowledge that she was growing and developing in her own way. And it just made me think, you know, that there was nothing wrong with Evie. You know, this piece of paper became my measuring stick for Evie. I was measuring her only against herself. And I think so often with neurodivergent children and children with disabilities, they're being measured against a normal that doesn't exist. And so abilities and strengths are being overlooked. And so I share this work now as a speaker all around the world to healthcare professionals, and I've been delighted at how they've been, they're absorbed by this idea and they're encouraged by it. And I've run workshops with families and parents, and we've made awesomeness forms for their children. And it's just been beautiful. And during COVID, we did one together with the SEN N8A community. And it's just fantastic when the parents feel like they can share these beautiful things about their children, because often they don't get a space to gush and share the things that their children can do because they're so constantly faced with the what's wrong questions and the deficit negative attitudes and language. And I just wanted to share this story about Max, just to give you a sense of the impact of a tiny piece of paper, and I guess the power of changing your words and changing your attitudes towards difference and celebration and ability. So Max had ended up in hospital in the ICU, and he wasn't in a very good way at all. And his parents were looking to prepare to say goodbye to him at one point. It was awful. And she reached out to her family, the mother of Max reached out to her community, I guess, of SCN8A community, and said, what do I do? And they said, why don't you print out Max's awesomeness form? And so she did. She printed out the form that we'd made together and printed it out and put it on the window of the ICU. And she said it was amazing. She emailed me the story, and she said, you know, everything changed because the doctors and the nurses and everyone who cared for Max read this form, and the way they interacted not only with Max and with Max's family, but with each other changed so significantly. Their language was more positive, they were calmer, they were kinder to each other. They started to ask really powerful questions of the family. And the healthcare professionals said, you know, we really see the full picture of who we're fighting for here. It's not just a heart or a lung or a kidney or a disease. It's an actual whole person with a beautiful family wrapped around him. And so I wanted to share this story, and I'm so glad that we get to talk about it a little bit down the track. But I'll leave it for there and come back with through the questions.
Thanks, Rachel. That was amazing and just an incredible form. Now, coming at it from a clinician side, what are the biggest bits of advice or pieces of advice that you can give to a healthcare professional who wants to find out more about the children and the families they care for, but just aren't really sure how to go about it? What would you advise?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I think everyone is a little bit scared of each other. And it doesn't matter if you're a healthcare professional and you feel like you might have this persona and there's potentially a hierarchy, and the parents are coming in with a lot of fear. And I think people just need to be asked really good questions. And in my work as a healthcare professional communication consultant, I've also developed a framework for making these questions safe and accessible for people, because often people don't know where to start. And so I've kind of broken down all the different kinds of questions into these 4 overarching categories. But if you were to ask one of these 4 questions outright, they'd be too big they're not actually safe, some of them could be quite triggering. And so I've run workshops with healthcare professionals to think of as many different ways to ask these 4 questions to really get a sense of nuance into the way that they're asking the families about their children. And I'm super excited to be able to share a resource with you that I've pulled together, because I've got so many questions that there's too many to share in this webinar today. So we'll make sure you get that. But I've kind of pulled out just a few from each section just to give you an idea of the kind of questions that parents really need to be asked and really want to be asked. And when you ask those kind of beautiful nuanced questions, the answers you're going to get are really clear as well. And then you can work with each other. And if you have a sense of wanting to be clear, kind, and curious, then those are the kinds of questions you'll end up landing on.
Sorry, I'm muted. There'll be some of these questions and forms available after the presentation for all the attendees. So talking about the medicalized model, as part of the Play for All Accelerator, as we were on our way to Billund to visit the Lego Foundation, I listened to the next speaker talk all about the medicalized model and its impact. And we've been lucky enough to work with Jamie in the National Association for Special Educational Needs over the past year. So very excited to hand over to Jamie.
Thanks, Chris, and I'm also very happy to be here. And you can all hear me okay? Fantastic. So I'm going to very briefly just talk a little bit about why I'm going to talk about play and agency. So as I said before, my work kind of focuses on transdiagnostic approaches. So what that means is we kind of look beyond kind of isolated conditions or diagnoses to look at what might be consistent across all these different areas. So rather than looking at a single factor, we kind of break them open into these very complex looking network maps, looking at the interconnectedness of lots of different needs or symptoms of conditions that people might have. And as part of this work, there's gradually been an understanding that across multiple different types of needs and diagnoses, there appear to be within these sorts of networks key influencer factors that kind of go across them all. So much like an influencer in a social network, it's the kind of main thing that seems to be sustaining everything else that's going on. And when it comes to sort of fundamental difficulties or sort of mental health difficulties, there appeared to be a single factor, and work of Caspi and colleagues kind of first started to look at that, started to pull back across, you know, all of these different types of diagnoses there in their sort of smaller ovals back to kind of broader concepts, so externalizing difficulties or internalizing difficulties. And then even further back than that, they sort of identified a single factor that seemed to be underpinning all of these difficulties, and it was named the P factor. Because a lot of the kind of analysis that you can do will tell you whether this thing exists, but it won't tell you what it is. So statistically, we knew this thing existed, and it seemed to be underpinning all the difficulties people experienced. And that then began this big kind of search for the single thing that ruled everything else, this kind of P factor. And so there are lots of different avenues that people went down to try to understand what is this thing. And my work really focused on looking at uncertainty, and uncertainty being this fundamental difficulty that we all experience, regardless of any particular diagnosis we might have. As long as we're human, we struggle with uncertainty. And one of the kind of big reasons for this, it aligns with different models of cognition that we currently have around how we make decisions under uncertainty and the overall function of our brain, which is essentially to keep us alive. And it does that by regulating our energy. To regulate our energy, it needs to understand how to be energy efficient. When it doesn't understand how to be energy efficient, it sees that as a threat. because potentially we're not at our optimum. So we don't know what's going on. It's bad news as far as our brain's concerned at a physiological level, and we think that reflects up at a psychological level, why we have this drive away from uncertainty. And it's all underpinned by, you know, our decision making under uncertainty, which is theorem by a guy called Bayes. It's just my excuse to put it's all about the Bayes in there. And if we're thinking about uncertainty and why that's such a difficulty, it's particularly relevant for healthcare settings. So uncertainty is all pervasive in a healthcare setting across all different stakeholders and actors within a healthcare setting. And there has been a large body of research looking at uncertainty within healthcare. An example here is just looking at experiences of uncertainty in a diagnostic process. And you can see we've got this kind of overarching uncertainty between patients and clinicians at the top there. But you can see there's a lot of uncertainty throughout this entire process. And in fact, across the whole area of healthcare, across multiple different levels, all different stakeholders, there's varying types of uncertainty that everybody's experiencing. So this fundamental difficulty that we all struggle with is amplified within this setting amongst everybody. So how do we address it? Well, we typically have two routes to take us out of uncertainty, and that's knowledge and agency. You know, the recent pandemic kind of brought that to our attention. Some of us might have tried to knowledge our way out of that situation, reading everything we could on Google to find out what was going on. Others of us may have gone down the agency route, that exaggerated need for control, and we went and bought all the toilet paper we could find as our way to try to agency our way out of that uncertainty. And they interact with one another. And we particularly, in terms of that knowledge route, we need agency, or we need a sense of confidence in the knowledge we have for that to actually be an effective way for us to manage uncertainty. So agency is really, really important for tackling this fundamental difficulty that's particularly pervasive in healthcare. Something that helps us with this is play. Play is an intentional space where we engage with uncertainty. It's this sort of paradoxical situation where we're actually exposing ourselves to uncertainty. It's where we create a problem and often solve it. You look at young children's play, they're often putting themselves in extraordinary situations they're not familiar with. My kids and my niece here, you know, playing with gravity in this particular situation. But we're in control over our lack of control. It's a familiar uncertainty, that play. And actually it's in the service of gaining knowledge to help us better face uncertainty in the future. So when we look at that kind of model, we realize how beneficial play is, that idea of playing with uncertainty in terms of increasing our agency and therefore helping us to better navigate those uncertain situations. It's this kind of opportunity to generate resources for sort of novel behavior and creativity. And therefore, when we're looking at kind of healthcare, it's a reason why we want to try to maximize play in those situations, because it facilitates agency and it creates this sort of self-reinforcing virtuous circle. So we need to make sure we're looking at opportunities for play, and it's looking at that play as a verb, not a noun, not a thing. It's a way of being. So playfulness, it doesn't have to just be an act. And agency, we can think about that in terms of choice. We need knowledge to make choices. We can think of it too in terms of voice. So everything Rachel was speaking about there. We also know that play and agency are two things that are also fundamental for hope. You can't have hope without agency. And hope is also another thing that helps us to navigate those uncertain healthcare situations.
Thank you, Jamie. Now, we've obviously been knowing each other for a while now, and this always, you know, from a researcher perspective, it just enthralls me. From a clinician side, though, when clinical teams are so busy and having so many interactions with families on a daily basis, what are the simple ways that we can actually support agency development with each interaction that we're having with families?
I mean, I think, you know, I think Rachel's given a really good example there straight away of that opportunity for sort of voice. But if we think about agency, we can start to operationalize it in terms of kind of voice, choice, and ownership, and looking at opportunities for those three things. One thing I would say is it can look like something that's an easy fix if you're looking at that voice. So offering people the opportunity to feed into decisions. One thing I would just say is you also need to be kind of pragmatic and to think carefully about what can we actually follow through on. And that's where you might need to make some of those pragmatic compromises, because when offering choice, the one thing that's worse than not being consulted is being consulted and feeling like you've been ignored. So it's making sure when we're looking for those opportunities for voice or for choice that we can follow through. So it can look like a really easy fix when we think voice, choice, and ownership, but it's just taking a step back as an organization and say, well, what are the pragmatic constraints on what we can do? And recognizing that and not beating ourselves up about that, but saying, okay, where's the wiggle room? Where can we actually start to kind of put some of this in place and then gradually sort of increase opportunities for that?
That's great. Thank you, Jamie. Now, our last speaker, I don't really think needs much introduction, to be honest, but we met last year and actually had the privilege of seeing the new Lego MRI machine coming out, and I'll ask some more questions about that later, but I'm going to hand over to Dorthe to give her presentation first.
And thank you. And I also want just to talk about more into what James just explained about learning for play also, and how to develop solutions that support the child's agency and how to allow them to give them choice. So I'm a research specialist at the Lego Foundation, and we truly believe in that the children are role models, and by that we are inspired every day by the child to look at the child and to see what is it that the child do in their daily lives that we haven't discovered yet. And that inspires us every day to look and to keep being curious about all the things that the child does and do that allow them to have agency in their own life so they can thrive, and by learning from them, we will be able to create better solutions for the child. So that inspires us every day. That is the children that are our role models, and we see them as our superheroes, actually. And that's also the core of why children explore the world around them, and they do it from the moment that they are born. And that is why learning for play is our DNA. So looking into the child, understanding the field of play, then we have a kind of a playground here where we have two people, an adult and a child, playing ball, and that's the field that we need to understand much more of. And we need to be aware of the different perspective and dimensions that are in playing ball together. It can be any kind of play materials. But it is to understand what is it that we can learn from a child, and how can we develop solutions by looking at the child and to understand the child much more and be curious about the child. They both have knowledge, the child and the adult, and that could be a child undergoing MRI scanner procedures. I've actually done a lot of experiences and create an environment for children undergoing MRI scanners, and I have experience in developing solutions for children undergoing MRI procedures. So this child is going into an MRI scanner, and they see themselves as a human being. And what they do is that play matters to them. That's their purpose of playing and undergoing this procedure. So they just want to play with any kind of play material. It doesn't need to be a ball. It can be anything that interesting, and that gives them this kind of empowerment that James just talked about, that also allow the child to thrive and have agency so they can cope with their world around them and understand how can I create my own understanding of going through this procedures as an MRI scan. As an adult, it could be both your parents, but it could also be the staff that see you as a child, and it could be clinicians that see you as a patient. As also, we see play as something that that helps me to achieve any kind of a goal. So, and this, we know what works for the child, seen from a knowledge point of view as an adult or a clinician, how to avoid the child to have anxiety based on our early experience and so forth. But if we want to create better solution for the child that supports their learning and development by having learning through play-based experiences, we need to balance between and create experiences that are balanced between the learners and empowerment dimensions and so forth. So being curious and look deeper into the child, we need also to look deeper underneath the surface, as we say, and look more broadly at what is it that actually we can be curious about. What is it that we don't see? What is it that we haven't discovered yet and that we are so curious about, that brings this agency into the child? And I have heard for many, many years now, being in this field, that curiosity is the big thing. And how do we create curiosity? Because we know once we have kickstarted the child curiosity, we have an open door into the child to be able to establish this relationship that we always talk about. Then in that where interaction happen, where the magic happen, that is also what they say. So, but seeing from the child's point of view, what is curiosity? How is the child curious? And do we know what is it that exactly makes the child curious in things? We don't know that. We sense it. We have a feeling of it, but we can't say exactly what is it that the child makes the child curious, and how do they experience things to understand how things. To understand the surrounding around them, how do they make sense, and what motivates a child, and how do they become self-confidence, and how do they relate to us, and not how do we relate to them, but how do they relate to us, and how do they build trust to us, and not the other way around, how do we build trust to them, and also how do we engage the child so they become more actively engaged in our own setting. And that is why I'm very much would love to have a dialogue around how can we build from the child point of view experiences that allow the child to be engaged and to learn. So then once we know this, and that allow the child to be more engaged and learn and to be creative, engaged and lifelong learners, then we will be in a better position to create experience that allow them to thrive and have agency. So that is the dialogue that I want to bring into this session here. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dorothy. One thing I've been dying to ask is how the project, the Lego MRI experience has gone, and I think you introduced it into 600 hospitals worldwide. With the sort of feedback that you've had.
Yeah, we've just received a lot of. For those of you that don't know about it, we had 600 models of Lego MRI scanners that volunteers in the Lego group have developed together with one of the hospitals in Denmark. And that was back in 2015. And based on this experience and all the requests he got from all around the world, we decided, the Lego Foundation decided to donate 600 Lego MRI machines for hospitals around the world. So we actually could request for one and for the hospital, and without 17 hours, we had 1,200 requests for Lego MRI machines, and we only had 600 models that we can distribute to hospitals around the world. Based on those 600, we had a lot of we invited them on a volunteer base to participate in a survey to capture the experience of those MRI machines, and it was quite amazing what they have experienced and how they use it, and it's amazing how they describe that this material that as a Lego MRI machine scanner actually allow the child to have open up and dare to speak and dare to ask questions to the staff, which supports them in having this dialogue about their uncertainties and the questions and they actually felt that this interaction, and it's very important to mention also that they use all kind of playful materials in my settings. But this actually helps the child to retell their journey, and that's the power that that gives the child the agency. So being able to retell how they think the journey is going to be together with the staff is actually quite strong element that we can learn much more in the future development of solutions for children. Having them to retell their own journey, how they imagine that this journey that they are going to experience in real life is about to be. Yeah, that's
amazing. And then in the interest of time, we're going to do the very last speaker, which will be myself. So I'm really keen to tell you about the journey that we've been going on at Little Journey through the Lego Play for All Accelerator, and how we are looking to try and support children to better, more personalized care. And the journey that we've taken over the years has been one that has changed the way of working at Little Journey. So it's not just been around producing a new feature, a new solution. It's also been about changing how we as a company are working. And some of the experiences that we've had to date and the realization is around the fact that that actually coming to hospital is very much an efficiency-driven process, one that is designed to try and maximize as many people getting through the system as we can on a daily basis in order to try and provide care for all. And what we know is that a lot of children feel anxious before a healthcare procedure. But one of the big things for me was around the realization that 50% of children go on to develop symptoms of bedwetting, nightmares, separation anxiety. And some of this is only for a few weeks, some of it's going on for years and years and years. And this situational trauma is something that we do in order to try and, we ignore in order to try and get that efficiency-driven service. And for neurodiverse children, where they're more likely to be having procedures, they're more likely to be experiencing anxiety from those procedures. We know a number of hospitals have introduced things like hospital passports, and these are typically paper-based forms. They're more trying to ascertain the past medical history, the drug history, rather than necessarily understanding about the child's needs and behaviors and preferences at that immediate time. And this is something that we wanted to try and address. But before we could address it, we needed to change our way of working. And the way that we did that was we wanted to try and create a new community that we could work with and engage on a regular basis. And to do that, we created systems and structures for us to be able to actually go into family homes and have play dates with families to learn more about them and their needs and how we could support them. We partnered with multiple schools around the UK of varying sort of socio-demographics, and we worked with special educational needs students within those schools on a regular basis, on a weekly basis, to try and not only co-create but validate and test and ideate with. One of the things that I'm most proud of, though, is the creation of this Little Leaders group. Now, this is a young person's advisory group that's for Little Journey, and we work with on a regular basis to try and engage with whenever we have something that we want tested or something that we want to hear from the voice of the people. And that Little Leaders group has been instrumental in our evolution. So overall, for this project, looking at how we could better support neurodiverse children coming to hospital, we worked with over 100 children in total, 170 parents, 68 clinicians, and 10 subject matter experts. And some of the key things that just kept coming out of us was the fact that neurodiverse children were much more likely to experience that situational anxiety. And the common challenges that kept on coming up were things like communication with staff, the waiting times, the environments they were being placed into, and actually the limited understanding of the process of coming through hospital and what was going to be happening, and the lack of control over that process. But then looking at it from the other side, from the clinician's perspective, actually 90% of the clinicians reported that they had insufficient information about the families that they were looking after on a weekly basis, and they wanted that information to try and improve what they were doing. And really the outputs from the project were threefold. The first was we created this new module designed to try and learn about the needs, the preferences, the behaviors of children, and doing it in a sort of gamified, engaging manner. And then from that, creating this clinician report that could be used as sort of a cheat sheet, a summary that the clinicians could use and access, and to better understand about that child's needs on a quick basis. We know that on average clinicians have about 6 minutes with families before anesthetizing them for surgery. So what can we do to empower them quickly to gain that rapport and trust and that psychological safety that Maureen mentioned? And the final thing is we wanted to engage children in not just digital play, but offline play, where they could work with the family in their own home to create really building an MRI machine and doing role play within that own MRI machine before they came into hospital. And the Little About Me module itself, the way that it works is a number of quizzes that children go through. There's quizzes for children, there's quizzes for the parents, and there's ones to work through together. And really we're trying to ascertain the communication preferences, the likes, the dislikes, the triggers that children may have when coming to hospital, and then what their coping style and strategies are, so we can try and augment that with the actual clinical practice on the day. To try and make it more fun though, what we've done is we've created buddies that work along the process, and these are some of the accessories that were designed by children in our young person advisory group, and then we've actually put them into the solution itself, and actually for completing the quizzes, for completing the preparation activities, we unlock these stars and can unlock these accessories and attire for the child. Really, the next steps though is we're actually launching and going live in a number of hospitals around the world. We're starting with English and French, and then looking to expand out into multiple different languages. And we'll be implementing the new solution into the hospitals and actually seeing what the benefit is, and speaking to families and children and the clinicians to understand the impact that it may have. And then finally, we're trying to reduce the barriers to adoption and try and reduce the things that can stop a clinician getting into and using this information. And one of the key things that we found is having that information accessible anytime, anywhere in the electronic health record system. So linking with the system to mean that it's available not just for the anaesthetist or the surgeon or whoever it may be, but for all staff looking after that child. So a lot of work has been done in the past, and a lot of work still to do on this project, but really excited to take this forward. If anyone does have any questions or would like a demo, please feel free to reach out. Now, we don't have a huge amount of time left for a panel discussion, but I do have one question that I really wanted to ask. And that was, if money wasn't a problem, if time wasn't a problem, if you could do anything for children coming into hospital, what would you do to reduce that uncertainty? What would be your dream solution to create in order to support families? Any of the panel have any thoughts? What would you do?
I think we've spoken a lot about uncertainty and curiosity and hope, and I think that if the entire system could be built where everyone was compassionate towards each other, like imagine those children walking to the hospital and all of the doctors and all of the nurses and all of the staff and everyone under that hospital roof was happy to see them and happy to go to work and happy to be in that space. And if that culture was one of love compassion and support, I think that everyone would have an amazing experience. So I think it comes back down to the teaching of the entire system right from the beginning. So, you know, just a small thing, just overhaul the entire system, but make it much kinder.
Thanks, Rachel. Any other thoughts?
I mean, I think mine would be along similar lines, I suppose, around that sort of mindset shift, you know, particularly when it comes to embracing and recognizing that inherent variability in all people, and to look at kind of also liberating play as part of that mindset shift, because, you know, often play is kind of defined and classified as an activity that's kind of subsumed into this plane of organization, and it's structured and ordered and kind of situated in dedicated and often adult defined time or spaces for specific purposes, and it's often being appropriated to be a kind of vehicle to drive children towards other goals there. And I think it's about trying to go back to just the inherent value of free play in itself, and to move away from the kind of linear perceptions of what play should be as well. So to Rachel's point of those kind of checklists, you know, my field in particular is finally receiving, of developmental psychology is finally receiving much needed criticism around a lot of assumptions around universality and developmental models, a lot of which were often based on kind of middle-class children of the Western or minority world. And atypical play, in kind of scare quotes, you know, play's been kind of often utilized as a way to other children, young people. You know, it's a central component of clinical diagnoses of autism and ADHD. You know, plays, you know, pathologized as repetitive and restrictive, or distracted and disorganized. And so I think it's about counteracting that and not seeing any type of play as kind of impoverished or inferior in any way, and instead kind of recognizing the value of free play and the diverse ways in which it can be expressed. So yeah, little mindset, mindset shift.
I was going to just real quickly add to, I agree with all that. What I would quickly add, just in an application standpoint, is if it was, you know, up to me, how I just would want to see it be more, you know, there be incentives on the practical level, and more of a push to normalize the level of quality of care that would be necessary to get outside of that conveyor belt mentality, which is partly what would be needed to truly create the kind of experiences we'd need that would reduce that anxiety for kids of different levels of, you know, where they're coming at, to have the time, right, to have a better understanding of each family and each child.
I have a simple one that is, when going to a hospital is a daunting experience for children and parents as well. And it's simply, if we can improve their life and quality of life for children and families going home, where they are able to live a good life. That is simply the dream, that they experience that their life has been improved and can live a full life.
That's amazing. Thank you, everyone. I think looking at the time, we're sadly going to have to end there. I'm going to hand over to Ryan for the very final bit, but thank you very much, everyone, for all your time and for attending today. We'll be sending around our new white paper, which is called The Benefits of Play in Healthcare, and any of the questions that we haven't answered that have come in, we'll get back to you to answer. Thank you.
And for those who are still watching at this time, you can download that white paper and other materials related to today's presentation under the handouts module within the GoToWebinar control panel. I would like to thank everyone for participating in today's webinar. As you heard, if we couldn't get to your questions, Little Journey will follow up with you, or if you have some further questions, you can direct them to the contact information that's up on the screen. I want to let you all know that you'll be receiving a follow-up email from X-Talks with access to the recorded archive for this event. A survey window will be popping up on your screen as you exit, and your participation is appreciated as it helps us to improve our webinars. Additionally, there is a link to view the recording of this event, which is in the chat box, and you can also share this link with your colleagues so they may register for the recording here as well. Now, please join me once more in thanking all of our speakers for their wonderful time here today. We hope that you all found the webinar informative. Have a great day, everyone, and thank you for coming.
Bye.
Thank you.